So today we're going to be talking about rhetorical analysis, and most of this information does come from Chapter 6 of Everything's an Argument, which I encourage you to read before watching this presentation. This presentation is just in support of that material. So what is the goal of a rhetorical analysis? And I'm going to say this in 3 different ways, but pretty much they're saying the same thing. I just encourage you to maybe write down the definition or to think about the definition that makes the most sense to you. But the 3 ways I'm going to explain it are kind of the same thing. So first, rhetorical analysis tries to determine how and why a text works or does not work to persuade an audience. To say that in another way, a rhetorical analysis tries to explain how a writer's use of rhetorical strategies contributed to the success or failure of his overall argument. Or we can think of it as a way of showing how a writer sways others through specific devices, right? So I was watching the comedian Louis C.K., who I've referenced before, and he made this claim that, hey, young adults today, they're too whiny, right? So for a rhetorical analysis, I would look at his entire argument, his entire bit about young adults being too whiny today, and I would pick it apart to determine whether or not through his different strategies, through his these different aspects of his argument, whether it actually worked to convince audiences that, you know what, yeah, young adults today are too whiny, or if it didn't work. So we're looking at the different aspects of an argument in order to decide whether the argument works or does not work. Okay, so what does a thesis statement look like for rhetorical analysis? Well, let's go ahead and look at a few. In each of these thesis statements, you'll notice that the student has put forward the author's purpose and has made a claim about whether the author did or did not achieve that purpose, if the author did or did not actually persuade us. So let's look at that first one. Right, despite some very vivid descriptions, Smith ultimately fails to provide the necessary information for his readers to come to an informed conclusion about gun rights. So notice there, the student says, yeah, there's some good vivid description in the article, in Smith's article, but you know what, he just failed to provide enough information. In the second one, even though his speech does not offer much background information, Jefferson's descriptions, visuals, and honesty encourage readers to support fossil fuel divestment. So notice, again, they point out that, hey, he doesn't offer a lot of background information. That part of his argument wasn't great. But Jefferson's descriptions and his visuals and his honesty, those really did encourage readers to kind of to support his position. So what about those body paragraphs? Well, in your body paragraphs, that's where you really get to put the button on specific moments or specific components of an argument that seemed really persuasive or really not, right? So going back to the Louis C.K. bit, right, I might have an entire paragraph just about his use of observation, right? Or I might have an entire paragraph just on his use of tone. Or I might have an entire paragraph just on Louis C.K.'s use of personal anecdote. So it's really about, in the body paragraphs, putting the button on specific things in an argument that were really successful, where you're like, this is what helped make a good argument. Okay, they're not plot summaries. You are not going to just summarize. You have to analyze. And finally, each paragraph should begin by introducing the component or the moment that you're going to be discussing. So for example, you might say, yeah, the author uses descriptive language, or the author makes use of visuals, or the author uses interviews, or the author uses repetition, right? So just start your paragraph by introducing the moment or the component that you're going to be analyzing, and then you can get into, quoting and analyzing. What does this look like? Let's go ahead and look at some sample topic sentences. So this comes from a real student's essay, and the student wrote, "Schlut's vivid descriptions of events enable readers to paint a picture of the situations in their mind's eye." So notice that the student put the button on vivid descriptions, and we could see that in the rest of the body paragraph, they would just focus on Skloot's use of vivid description and how that worked. The next one, Jefferson's inclusion of one of the posters used in the protest offers readers visual insight into the march, what the march actually looked like. So notice the student just put the button on Jefferson's use of visuals and is just going to be analyzing that in this paragraph. And this is really key, guys, when you're beginning your rhetorical analysis. Each paragraph should have a really clear purpose or really clear topic. Like, okay, in this paragraph, I'm going to analyze this part of the text. In this paragraph, I'm going to analyze this next part of the text. Okay, so some big points. The topic of a rhetorical analysis is the primary text, meaning your article. That is the thing you are writing about. Essentially, you're judging or critiquing or criticizing or making a decision about how well the author made his argument. Like, oh, yep, this was a good argument, or no, it wasn't. You are not commenting on the topic of the article. Rather, you are commenting on how well the author wrote the article, right? So if the article is about, for example, free speech, you're not saying, yeah, I really do think free speech should be limited. No, you're saying the argument about free speech or the author's argument about free speech was well served or maybe poorly constructed, depending. Okay, so I want us to look at a sample body paragraph really quick. Okay, and please take a second here to pause the video and read through this. So take a moment to read this paragraph on your own. Okay, so notice how the student begins by identifying a specific strategy, specifically vivid description, right? Skloot's use of vivid description, okay? And then the student actually provides us with an example of this through a quotation. That's always really nice to bring in a quotation that shows the strategy or shows the moment that you're talking about at work. It helps readers get a sense of the author's actual argument. Really important. The student does not just drop in that quote. No, they actually explain the importance of that quotation. So here's what the article says, but here's the effect of this quotation. Here's what it does to readers, right? It enables readers to imagine a lovely young woman in the prime of her life. That is the actual effect of that quotation. That is the analysis and explanation. And finally, then at the end, it shows how Skloot's descriptive language contributed to the success of her overall writing, right? How this specific moment, this is how it helped the overall writing. So ultimately, Skloot uses her language to personalize individuals. That's why it's so great. That's why the descriptions are so, this is why it works, because they make her writing really personal. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at some sample writing from real students. And I want you, as we're going through these, to pause and think about if each is coming from a rhetorical analysis. So we look at this first one. Go ahead and take a second, pause, read it. Okay, this does not come from a rhetorical analysis paper. Notice the giveaway, I really agree. That lets me know that, ooh, the purpose of this article, of this student's paper, is to agree rather than to actually analyze the success of the writing of the actual article. By quoting several Supreme Court decisions, the author reminds readers that speech, even hateful speech, is protected under the First Amendment. What do you think? Yes, this comes from a rhetorical analysis. Notice how they're focusing on a specific aspect of the writing that worked, which is quoting the Supreme Court. We really should use less plastic. What do you think? From a rhetorical analysis? No, it is not analyzing an actual text. It's not actually analyzing writing or critiquing writing, right? It's just talking about plastic. Finally, the author encourages readers to use less plastic by bringing in some startling information about the effect of plastic on the environment. Yes, right? Notice how it's talking about what the author is actually, how the author is actually affecting readers. So this does come from a rhetorical analysis. So, some questions to consider. I'm not going to read them for you, but I do encourage you to pause here and really look at these three sets of questions as you begin thinking about your own rhetorical analysis.